Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Back to School conference. My name is Andrea Schottefer, and I have the privilege of serving as president of the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. It's truly an honor to welcome each of you here today. Thank you for taking the time to join us virtually. At the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan, our mission is rooted in support, advocacy, and empowerment. Whether you're a parent, educator, healthcare provider, or a student, we want you to know you are not alone. We are here for you. Across the US, approximately 3.4 million people live with active epilepsy, including nearly 500,000 children under the age of 17. Here in Michigan, around 14,000 children are navigating school and life with epilepsy. That's why this conference matters. Together, we're building communities of understanding, sharing tools and strategies, and preparing for success in the classroom and far beyond. Today's conference is designed to help you prepare for the upcoming school year with confidence. You'll hear practical tips, real-world experiences, and expert guidance, all centered on ensuring students with epilepsy are supported, safe, and thriving. If this is your first time connecting with us, we invite you to stay involved. This event is just one of the many opportunities we offer to support you. You can visit our website at epilepsymichigan.org or reach out directly through our Here For You helpline at 800-377-6226. This conference is made possible through the MyEP Project, Michigan Youth with Epilepsy Transition, a vital initiative of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Family Center, and Children's Special Health Care Services. We are deeply grateful for their partnership and commitment to children, youth, young adults, and families living with epilepsy. As we begin our time together, we hope this space brings you encouragement, connection, and knowledge. Let's kick off our journey with an incredible opening discussion. We're so grateful you're here.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our first session for our Back to School conference. This one is titled Epilepsy and Education, Insights and Learning Needs, Assessments and Safety. So we're so glad that you've joined us, and we know epilepsy can greatly impact a student's learning. So how do we identify and assess those educational needs? And of course, how can families partner with schools and medical professionals to create a supportive and safe learning environment for all our students with epilepsy? So whether you're a parent or a caregiver, an educator, or a student yourself, we hope that this conversation will offer you clarity and encouragement and support. And speaking of that, I'm so glad to introduce our two speakers for this session. They both come to us from Corewell Health East. They're both pediatric epileptologists. So we have Dr. Nancy McNamara, who is a pediatric epileptologist whose clinical work includes helping epilepsies navigate the developmental and learning challenges that can arise with epilepsy. She also serves as in the leadership of our professional advisory committee. So thank you for that. And Dr. Erin Fedak Romanowski, who is also a pediatric epileptologist, who brings special expertise in supporting families as they consider the intersection of seizure control, medication effects, and school performance. So welcome to you both today. I'm so glad that you're here. We can just dive right on in this conversation. And I'd love to start with a big picture question as we begin. What are some ways that epilepsy can impact a child's ability to focus, learn, or perform well in school? I wonder if you could address that, Dr. McNamara.
Yes, thanks. And thanks, Renee, for inviting us to do this. So how much a child's epilepsy impacts their learning at school is incredibly variable, meaning that some children may not be affected much at all by their epilepsy, but then other children are greatly impacted. And this is really specific to the child, the type of epilepsy they have, how many medications they're on. And this can be a tricky one to tease out, and oftentimes needs formal testing to kind of really get to the crux of some of the problems. The number one thing that children with epilepsy will have or complain about is it just takes them longer to process information than it does for other children. But again, it's incredibly variable.
Right, right. And Dr. Fedak, in addition to seizures themselves, how might seizure medications affect things like memory, attention, processing speed, all those things that Dr. McNamara was just speaking about?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Renee, again, for inviting us to speak about this. It's a great question and one that families ask often. So the theme that you'll probably hear both of us say today is that things are quite variable. Every child is different. So not everyone will have the same side effects from medications, but anti-seizure medications potentially can cause behavioral side effects, which could include irritability, hyperactivity, depression, of course, all of which may impact school. They can have changes in appetite, headaches, stomach aches, sedation, and yes, some patients do report some decreased memory, word finding difficulties, and processing speed. So those are certainly things that could happen, doesn't mean they will. And so we often ask, what negative effects is your child prone to experience? And then we try to avoid those things, and that might play a role in which medicines we choose.
Yeah, good. And it just helps maybe to know some of those things for parents or also educators to be looking for. So that's really helpful. And speaking of those assessments, Dr. Fedak, like at what point would you recommend that a family seek a formal educational or maybe a neuropsychological assessment for their child?
I think, really anytime there's any sort of concern, so if there's concerns related to academic performance, concerns related to attention, one of the big red flags that I think about when I think about this would be if parents or teachers notice any sort of decline or major change in school performance, behavior, their attitudes towards school or learning. For children who already have developmental delays or learning disabilities, I think it makes sense to even get a baseline evaluation at the beginning of their epilepsy diagnosis. I think that can really help.
That's great because it, gives something to compare to. Exactly. So you have that data, so to speak. And Dr. McNamara, can you walk us through what a neuropsychological evaluation typically involves? So how can that help with treatment or with school planning? What can that do?
Yeah, so I think of a neuropsychological evaluation as sort of having three main parts. One is actually just getting input from teachers, if the parents aren't the teachers, and having kind of objective assessments about how a child is doing either in the one classroom that they're in or if they're older in the multiple classrooms. Then there's input obtained by the parents or caregivers themselves about how the child's functioning, any behavioral issues, attention issues. And then there's a one-on-one session, sometimes two one-on-one sessions with the neuropsychologist where the child's actually going through very formal evaluations and assessments that are appropriately assigned based on their age and where they are developmentally. And you had actually already alluded to this, Renee and Dr. Fedak, which is that is a one moment in time. We know that some children have bad days. Some days they're better to be assessed than others. That's one moment in time that we can then use for future reevaluations, which is really common in our world of taking care of children with epilepsy. Often neuropsych evaluation is just a one moment in time, which we then compare every year to every 3 years for follow-up assessments based on how that child's doing, what medications they're on, and sort of the big picture.
Really helpful. Thank you. Another type of question, what are some helpful ways that families can communicate with school staff about a child's seizures or an epilepsy diagnosis? I'm thinking about families for whom this is new, but also every year there's a new teacher, there's a new setting and a new school personnel. So what might you recommend, Dr. McNamara?
Yeah, I think some of the best advice that I've been given to help guide families here is don't pretend that, or don't think that that school or that teacher has any experience with epilepsy. And if they do, whatever your child is going through is unique. And so just have a sit-down conversation or a virtual face-to-face conversation with that teacher and with the school beforehand, and just explain it based on the way that you understand it. And I think that this is so important because some children have a cause of their epilepsy that's easily treated. Other people, it doesn't matter what they do, that child is going to continue to have seizures. And no teacher is an expert in epilepsy. Well, at least that I know of. No teachers in schools. It's very uncommon for them to be experts in epilepsy, especially in your child. So just have a really honest conversation about how your child is being affected by their epilepsy and sort of the expectations based on their diagnoses, and just be kind, give them a little bit of grace as they're getting to know your child. And then I'd say frequent reevaluations and open communication about how your child's doing. You can set up some expectations for them, just as you expect them to give you feedback throughout the year, and knowing what that is going to look like throughout the year, I think is really important right off the bat.
Yeah, that's great. Because I think setting the school year off that way can be so helpful, because they can provide feedback as well of what they are observing. And that's really, really valuable. So thank you. Likewise, some schools, we wish it was more than there are currently, but some schools have like school nurses. We support that. We want to see that happen. But they might also assign a teacher to support a child's safety and comfort during the day. And I wonder, Dr. Fedak, if you have any tips or suggestions for how to best work with some of these supportive school personnel.
Sure. So, I think the first thing, any child with epilepsy should have a seizure action plan that they are giving to the school, whether that be as a nurse, a teacher, the point person who is going to be learning about their child's health condition. So having that seizure action plan should be, that should be given to the school. It should be reviewed with that point person, and that should be updated every year. Most schools require that, and most epilepsy providers give a seizure action plan that they can talk through with the parents. I think other important things to talk about with the school would be if there are certain triggers to be avoided, certain known triggers for each individual child. Those should be avoided. They should be discussed and kind of reevaluated over time if they change. Discussing medications and potential perceived side effects that the parents have noticed, so that school is aware. I also think it's a good idea when medications are being changed, that the school is aware of that, and any potential things that they should potentially be aware of when those changes are occurring. So, sometimes we're asked to provide a letter describing the medication titration schedule, and if somebody's expected to be more sleepy or more moody, as those changes are occurring. So I think just communication is really important. Some children might benefit from having a paraprofessional in school with them, or a one-to-one aide if that's appropriate. And of course, it depends on what's available in each school, in each district. But I think having those conversations at the beginning of every year are important.
Yeah, that's great. I know sometimes when it comes to medications, parents can feel a little bit torn in how those medications are impacting their student when it comes to learning, because it may be very effective for seizure control, but create some difficult side effects. Or, how do you approach those kinds of conversations, Dr. Fedak, balancing those priorities? And again, realizing it's individual for each child and each family.
Yeah. We have these conversations a lot, and it's a really, it's a very real challenge and an important conversation for parents to have with their providers. Of course, uncontrolled seizures can lead to neurocognitive deficits and decline. And so seizure control, of course, is really important for that, and of course for safety and overall health. But of course, anti-seizure medications can impact learning, and we don't want parents or patients to feel like medications are doing more harm than good. So, if there are side effects, sometimes we just need time, but other times we need to potentially reduce the dose or increase it more slowly, adjust the timing of the medication. Sometimes switching to something like extended release can be helpful. sometimes we really do need to change the medicine if the side effect is intolerable. So, I mean, I think the big thing is continuing to have those ongoing conversations with your provider, and really communicate with your team before stopping a medicine, because sometimes making a tweak to the schedule or the formulation could be the fix. And then when is it time to actually change a medicine? I think if seizures are continuing and you've optimized the dose, if those side effects don't get better after a couple of weeks, then I really think, it's important to think about changing the medicine. But again, it's individual to each child.
Yeah, very helpful. And I know those are big questions. And what I'm hearing you both saying quite a bit is like, paying attention to observation, and also just keeping that communication going. So valuable. Dr. McNamara, we know sometimes seizures are not visible at school or as easily detected. So perhaps nocturnal seizures, they're not happening at school, or absence seizures that may be happening frequently, but not easily detectable sometimes. So how might some of those seizures still impact school performance? And if you have any tips for communicating about that?
Yeah, great question. So absence seizures, which for those in the audience aren't aware, are typically brief seizures. Sometimes you cannot tell outwardly that someone's having an absence seizure, and you can only tell based on EEG, and children can lose, 10, 20, 30 seconds of time because they're having a seizure, and these can happen multiple times per day. If this is something that your child is experiencing, again, a theme here, which is please have open communication with the child's school and teachers, and also with the physicians who are taking care of your child, because we really need to reduce these in frequency when we can to optimize that child's understanding and learning time in the classroom. Often those children aren't aware, and they're losing those moments of time, which can really add up with multiple seizures per day. Another type of seizure that children can have that can affect them during the day are seizures at night or first thing in the morning. It's pretty rare that I have to write a letter that says that a child needs to have delayed start in school, but it's not uncommon that I have children that I take care of who are very sleepy in the morning or have required, seizures themselves can cause children to be sleepy, or requiring rescue medicines can cause children to be sleepy. Don't presume that the school is going to know when your child is experiencing some of these symptoms or has had seizures. Please just have somebody who's your contact person at the school that you can give them a heads up so that they can also keep a close eye on your child too. I think that's really important. I think that that's probably the biggest theme that I've seen where families are unhappy, and I completely understand them being unhappy with caregiving at school, but there's just such a difference when you and I are thinking about epilepsy all day and all night and the school is not. So just have a contact person, a teacher, a homeroom teacher, a principal, that you're communicating with how your child's doing. Oh, it was a rough night. They had lots of seizures, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's really helpful, because also, I mean, those kinds of things can impact behavior too. And we never want to see something punitive when something medical is going on. And so that's really important. And speaking of those kinds of things, we also care about the whole person and their self-esteem and peer relationships, all of those social components. Also curious, how might epilepsy or even medication side effects influence some of those, and what might we look for?
What a big loaded question. This is one of the things I'm most passionate about in taking care of children with epilepsy, as is Dr. Fedak, is, the things other than seizures, which I hate, but the other ways that epilepsy may affect children. We know that children with epilepsy have lower self-esteem. We know that they have a higher rate of depression, anxiety. It's a very stigmatized disease. And so there are lots of ways that child can be affected. I think working early on with a therapist would be my dream for every child with epilepsy and their parents, as we navigate and we meet the needs of each child at these different stages of their development in their life. I'd say talking about epilepsy rather than putting it in a box that we don't talk about, especially at school and especially with peers, helps to normalize it. Lots of children have asthma, and that's not something that we usually shy away from. But for epilepsy, it is something that is so stigmatized and has been for so long. And so when it starts to really affect their self-esteem, and then for multiple reasons lead to higher rates of depression, anxiety, that really it's really something that has stuck with me as I've watched lots of children and their families struggle with epilepsy. Sometimes that's a bigger struggle. And so I think being aware of that, in addition to all of the other things that we're doing as supporters for these children, being aware, being proactive early on, and not having epilepsy be something that we hide from. I think that those are really, really important things.
Huge. It's huge. Yeah.
Therapy would be huge if that, if we lived in a perfect world, everyone would see a therapist from the moment that they were diagnosed with epilepsy, as with their parents and their siblings. Having their physicians and their caregivers screen for anxiety and depression early on would be really, really key, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And just, thinking about just the importance of having a number of different kinds of adults and community resources around these children and also our families. It really changes things. And just to let everybody know, we have a list of therapists on our website that we have trained. In addition to all of their training that they bring, we have trained them in epilepsy and seizures. And so we have some people to recommend if that's something that you need. And something we need not shy away from. It's super important. And Dr. Fedak, kind of a similar question, do you have any suggestions for how families can help children navigate those feelings of difference or anxiety, maybe about seizures in the classroom or just at school? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. McNamara hit the nail on the head with a lot of the things that she's already said, and I agree with those very much. I think having open discussions at home about how their child feels about their epilepsy, validating the way they feel about their epilepsy, do they feel comfortable talking about their seizures with classmates, with teachers at school? Why or why not? I think those are just important kind of thoughtful questions that parents can ask, their children at home. Similarly, I also think in a perfect world, children with epilepsy and their families would have a therapist. I always say it's my dream to walk into every clinic room with a therapist next to me, because I think there is such a component of potential anxiety or children who just feel different because of this unfortunate stigma that exists. So I think therapists can be helpful just to process some of the emotions that both children and their families may have surrounding this diagnosis. And therapists can also help families in terms of how to talk about it at home. Another thing, unfortunately, that we have to think about is bullying. That's a sad reality for some kids in school. And so encouraging parents to bring those concerns up to the school, and really education and makes a big difference. So providing education about seizures and about epilepsy to the school, to peers, also can potentially make a big difference. I know the Epilepsy Foundation sometimes is able to provide education to schools and to peers of children with epilepsy. And so that's something to consider too.
Yeah, we're absolutely delighted to do that. We want to come alongside in those ways. So super important. And just kind of as some final thoughts, what are a few things you hope families will remember from this session, or maybe even just the questions we ask as they think about advocating for their child and learning and safety at school? Yeah, I wonder if you all might want to address that. Dr. McNamara, how about you?
Yeah, I would say I think the key things are communication, right? And just presume that the school is new to this. You can ask what their experience has been with epilepsy, who maybe has had seizure training in the school, their experience with some of the rescue meds, and then what supports can be provided for your child based on their special cognitive needs, if there are any. And then having clear expectations about when's the next follow-up touch base time point, and who do I communicate with when something urgent happens. I think open communication is huge, and as a parent, I would imagine it's very easy to take things to heart as a parent myself, but try to give people a little bit of grace as you're trying to work with the school to do the very best on behalf of your child.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Fedak, what would you add?
Yeah, I think encouraging people to try to think about, the school as, a partner in your child's care, and a partner in your child's experience, and trying to work together to advocate and provide education about epilepsy. I am sure, and I know from hearing from many other parents, there have been frustrations that can happen with school. And so again, being organized from the beginning, having clear expectations, understanding who the point people are at school is really important. Obviously, resources will vary school to school, district to district, and depend on each child's individual needs. An IEP is sometimes appropriate for some children, so individualized education plan. And one thing we often tell our families is, at least in a public school system, if you have concerns about your child's learning, putting in a documented written request does require a timely response from the school. And so sometimes I encourage parents to do that if they're really having concerns about academic performance and learning. And then just remember that your providers are here to help. We have social workers, we have the wonderful Epilepsy Foundation, and we all want to advocate and help your child in school so they can be
Yes,
successful.
thank you so much. And we do all want to help. I mean, we're so grateful to offer this on-demand conference every year. We're so grateful to provide some programming for our teens and our younger children. We have a camp, we have a program for adolescents. We've got opportunities for parents to connect with one another. We don't want anyone to go on this journey alone. And I really want to thank both of you for not only your expertise, but your passion and your compassion in this work. It really shines through. And you've also given us a perfect handoff to our next session, which will be about upholding and advocating for student rights, and also how to teach fellow students about epilepsy. So stay tuned for that, and we thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to our second session of our Back to School conference. And this one is so important as our students are preparing to return to school. Today, we're talking about championing educational rights and resources for students with epilepsy. So in this session, we're going to focus on supports that are available to help students with epilepsy thrive in educational settings, from legal protections to inclusive school programs. So today we are very honored to hear from two outstanding leaders at the Epilepsy Foundation of America, our national organization. And they are Allison Nickel, who is Senior Director of Legal Advocacy, and Kalia Fleming, who is Epilepsy and Seizure Safe Classrooms Consultant. So Allison is going to help us understand the legal rights of students with epilepsy and how families can advocate effectively for those rights. And Kalia is going to share about the newly developed Seizure Safe Classroom Program, a national initiative that is designed to equip educators and classmates with knowledge and tools to support students living with epilepsy. So welcome to both of you. And to start us off, I'm wondering if you might just briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background and how you came to do this work at the Epilepsy Foundation. Kalia, maybe we could start with you.
Absolutely. Good morning, and thank you for that warm welcome and introduction, and thank you for having us both here today. I think it's a very important topic. My background is in public health education. So at heart, I am a health educator. I believe in making sure I have appropriate resources for folks so they can develop the best healthcare plans for themselves and their families. I actually became aware of this project through the Epilepsy Foundation for work being done or highlighted through SOPHE, the Society for Public Health Education. I am the chapter president for the Florida SOPHE chapter and came in contact with the multicultural outreach director and health equity director at the Epilepsy Foundation, Ms. Tameta Kozart, who's awesome.
He is
So
awesome.
she's the one who made the connection, and that's how I got started in this work as a consultant. And my role in particular was to develop the K through 12 classroom curriculum, content, and materials that we'll talk about in a bit that's included in the Seizure Safe Classrooms Toolkit.
Absolutely amazing. And we're so grateful for Sophie at the statewide level, at the national level, and all the partnerships that have been happening between the Epilepsy Foundation and Sophie also. So thank you. Allison, would you introduce yourself, please?
Of course. First, let me say I second the shout out to Medica and Cozart and think that Seizure Safe Schools is a great force for good in this world. And you'll be hearing more about that later, but it's a great program. So I'm Allison Nicol. I'm Senior Director of Legal Advocacy at the Epilepsy Foundation. And what that means is I run the Legal Defense Fund. And what that means is I am the entire Legal Defense Fund. We only have one person dedicated to that role, and that's me. I've been at the foundation about 7 years, and prior to that, I spent 30 years inside the federal government, primarily inside the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, where I led the Disability Rights Section, which is the part of the government that enforces the Americans with Disabilities Act and coordinates the Section 504 rule among all the federal agencies. So I've been doing this a long time. Half my life. As of this year, 35 years, half my life. We just celebrated the 35th anniversary of the ADA, and I'm delighted to be here to help the people of the great state of Michigan. I'm a Midwesterner. I grew up in the Midwest and not far from Michigan. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, cool. Shout out to the Midwest. I'm going to third that shout out to Miss Tameta Kozar. Wonderful. I'm looking forward to her seeing all this. Wonderful. Okay, so I think we'll start really talking about these legal protections and rights and then move on to the Seizure Safe Schools program, Seizure Safe Classroom program, excuse me. What rights do students with epilepsy have? So important, right? Under the federal laws, like the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 and the Rehabilitation Act. These are all really important pieces of legislation that have been game changers. What rights do they open for students with epilepsy?
Sure. So let me first say, before I start talking about federal law, that in whatever state you live in, there may also be protections under state law. I don't deal with the state laws, but I just want to make clear that if you're searching for an answer and you don't find it in federal law, you may find it in the state law. The good news is there are a lot of federal civil rights protections for students. We're gonna emphasize K through 12 today, but I also want people to know that the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 offer protections for students in the post-secondary world. So if your student is a junior in high school and has one more year before they launch into whatever, then their next path forward is, there's going to be protections there under both the ADA and Section 504 in colleges, in trade schools, in HVAC school, and whatever kind of next phase of education your child goes into. I do tell parents, if you have a child that has 504 needs or ADA needs in college, start early. Look for a college that is disability friendly. Yes, the law protects you, but it's always better to go to college that understands their responsibilities to your child and that will create a positive learning environment for your child as a student with a disability. Also, for college, housing. There are very strict housing rules. If you have a student with, if your child needs a roommate, then the rule for the first year of college may be you don't get a roommate. You're gonna have to negotiate that. And the reverse is true also. You want a private room for epilepsy-related reasons, then the college says no. So these are just all things that need to be negotiated and set up in advance. You don't want to wait till the starting day of classes to try and negotiate those kinds of things. So start early, choose the right college. With respect to trade schools, that's also a place of education. You need extra time on standardized testing or anything like that, any other kind of accommodations. Trade schools are places of education, and that all counts. So getting back then, starting with K through 12, there are three laws really that protect your children in K through 12. One is called the IDEA, and you may have heard of that, and that really pertains to children who have difficulties or need specific things related to the learning experience. So maybe they need a dedicated aide, maybe they need more time for testing, maybe they need a separate testing area. That can be IDEA. It can also be Section 504, and it can also be the ADA. The ADA covers public education and private education. I think one important thing to know is if your child is in a wholly private K through 12 school, Section 504 and the IDEA probably are not going to apply, but the ADA will give them the same type of protections as those other laws. Section 504, which is part of the Rehabilitation Act, offers similar protections, but the difficulty doesn't necessarily have to be related to the learning experience. So need to take my rescue meds on the bus, need to not ride the bus, but be able to have my mother take me because I may have a seizure on the bus, need to participate in my football practice and carry my meds with me. So all of those laws combined really protect your child in every aspect of education. You can't be told you can't be on the swim team. You can't be told that you can't be on the debate team or the travel team, or you can't go to, whatever the trip is without a private nurse accompanying you. All of that stuff is disallowed under the ADA 504 and IDEA. So there's really a globe of protection around your children. And we can certainly talk in more specifics about the things that are the most common things that are asked for, where courts largely agree. These are things that school districts have to do.
Yeah, well, speaking of that, what are some of those common legal issues that may come up for students? And we realize everybody is particular. If you've met one person with epilepsy, you've met one person with epilepsy, and all of those specific needs to a person matter too. But what are some of the most common ones that you encounter?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about the common ones, and then I want to talk about a case that was just decided by the United States Supreme Court. And what was asked for was actually fairly complicated and very uncommon. And yet the court said, yes, you have to provide this as a school district. Because I want folks to understand that who have children with more complex medical needs, maybe of epilepsy and some other medical condition, that all of those disabilities are covered by these laws, not just epilepsy. But the common things that students need are extra time on tests, separate rooms, tutoring. What do you do about a bunch of absences where the child has to come in later? They have a seizure in the morning, or they've had a seizure the day before and not prepared to go to school. And the school has a rule of you can only have, X many absences, and then it's going to start to affect your ability to either get a good grade or even continue, in some cases, continue in the school district at all. Many kids who have epilepsy may also have a reading or learning difficulty. So they may have a processing disorder, or they may have ADHD or easily distracted. So those are the common things that, and I'm reading now from document that we're going to post in the comments from the Department of Education that is specific to children with epilepsy. And it's a great 101 how-to guide of kind of the most frequent things that parents are going to ask for on behalf of their children. I want to talk just briefly about the Supreme Court case, because what happened in the Supreme Court case is very unusual. So this was a student in K through 12 who had very serious seizures, and she had them always in the morning. So she wasn't able to start school until noon. And she had asked, her parents asked for, under the IDEA and Section 504 and the ADA, that her school days start at noon and carry on till 6 o'clock at night, so that she could get the required number of school hours. Now, that's a very unusual request, right? And just to clarify, they weren't asking that the school building be kept open until 6 and that a teacher be there. They were requesting that that be done in their home. And the school district said, no, that's a fundamental alteration and undue hardship of what we do, and we're not doing it. So they sued successfully. And this case ended up in front of the Supreme Court for sort of some technically unrelated reasons. But the Supreme Court agreed that even that more complicated set of requests was required by the disability rights laws. And so that is a very positive sign that you often can successfully go beyond the kind of standard things we're talking about in order to get whatever additional needs your child has met in schools. The idea of carrying your medication with you, and I'm so happy that we're going to discuss the seizure safe classroom aspect of this, is a big deal. It's a big deal for schools for reasons I really don't understand. But you will run into some resistance on that. You're going to have to get some help probably to get that resolved. I think certainly students of a certain age should be able, and I think the law is on my side in saying they should be able to carry their rescue medications with them. These are not epilepsy stories, but there are stories of, kids with asthma who are not allowed to, we're not allowed to keep their inhalers with them at their practice sessions for their sports. And they had an attack, and, up in the school nurse's office is the inhaler, and the children don't make it. They often they often die. And so that just seems like completely unnecessary, horrible outcome. And so I think where we're constantly pushing for kids of a certain age, or, if it's a little kid, then give them an aide who carries the rescue medicine and knows how to administer it. These are very serious, life-threatening situations. And so school districts need to pay the proper amount of attention and deference on the issue of medication. So those are kind of the general things that I see. Extra time, special place, need an aid, don't tell me I can't play sports or do all of these other things simply because I have epilepsy. That is clearly disallowed under all of the federal civil rights laws.
Thank you. And I also want to name, because Allison is that person who is organizing and listening to all these cases of people who come to her, not just like legal cases, but situations. You can reach out via the Jean A. Carpenter Legal Defense Fund. And that is there for you to connect with Allison if you need some advice on something very specific, right? And we're so grateful for you, Allison, for that. So speaking of that, what should parents or guardians do if their child is being denied that accommodation or sensing that some sort of discrimination is happening in the classroom?
Well, there are different tracks for different laws. So if it's an IDEA learning related issue, that's a federal law, but it's administered by the states. So that's a very, the good news is it gives you a lot of due process, what are called due process rights, gives your child a lot of due process rights, and you as parents. That's the good news. The bad news about due process is that it can become a very complicated, multi-layered system that you have to go through in order to make change. But the basics are this. the law requires your child to be surrounded by a group of experts, either experts that you provide, or certainly the experts have to be provided in part by the school district. You may have somebody you want to add to that mix. You have a meeting, you identify the child's needs, you make a formal plan, whether it's a 504 plan or an IDEA plan, you make a formal written plan. You want to be as specific in that plan as you possibly can be about what your child's needs are. And you might want to try and have an advocate with you. I don't necessarily think you need to have a lawyer with you, because that sometimes can change the balance, to something that's more combative than necessary. I think in the first go around, you want to either educate yourself, take that document from the Department of Education with you and say, gosh, the Federal Department of Education says my kid can get these things and that's what they need. And I think that in the first go around, most school districts are going to be compliant, unless it's something fairly unusual that they don't see all the time. You are going to get resistance and carrying the meds, and you are going to get resistance from coaches of these teams who think that they have their own fiefdom and they are the sheriff of everyone, and they will make the rules. Thank you very much, and no laws apply to me. I've had many conversations with folks like that, and so you need to make the school district understand that, in fact, the ADA, the 504, and IDEA are the sheriff of the town, and your child will not be told by a coach or anyone else that they cannot play a sport just because they have epilepsy. Of course, everyone has to be qualified, for the sport. I mean, if you're not a good swimmer, that's a reason not to be on the swim team. But having epilepsy is not a reason to exclude a child from any sport or any after-school activity. And I think you want to put as many things in a 504 agreement as you can, because these things are all going to come up at some point. And what's going to happen when they come up and they're not in the plan is the school district's going to hold up the plan and say, well, you didn't ask for that. That's not in here. And so if that's true, your child is probably going to be denied. And whatever it is, the school trip, let's say. And then you're going to have to go back and ask for that to be remediated. So you're going to have to reopen the 504 plan, more bureaucracy, and get it changed, get the school district to agree. And if it's a point of contention, you might need a little more advocacy help. So what I tell first-time parents is, take a breath. There's plenty of protection for your student. You just need to figure out what that is. And meet with the school district if you want your own neurologist there, or some paperwork from your neurologist about your child's specific needs. Absolutely can do that. If you're feeling overwhelmed, try and find a friend or somebody who's been through this, through a group to help you advocate. Call me, I'll help you advocate. And so that's what I would tell first-time parents.
That's really great. Thank you so much for that. And we know there have been some changes at the federal level, including, big reduction in staffing at the Department of Education. I'm wondering if you can tell us, what does that mean for enforcement of disability rights and the protections in education? What encouragement might you add, or any advice around that?
I think there's a lot of information in the popular press, and it can be very confusing. I think I get calls from concerned parents that, are they going to take my 504 plan away from my student that I fought so hard to get in the process, that we just described? And the answer to all of that is, I don't know, and it depends. There have been drastic reductions in whether you agree with them or not, it's up to you. But factually, the Department of Education has closed 7 of its 12 regional offices. Its staff is now 50%, about 48% of what it was 6 months ago. That includes the offices of civil rights. And so for those who are first time at this or don't necessarily know, so what happens when the school district says no, not on the IDEA, but on a 504 plan? Well, what happens is, if you can't resolve it, you go to the Department of Education in Washington and you file a complaint under Section 504 with their Office of Civil Rights. And those offices of civil rights have investigators and lawyers that work there. And they will investigate whether or not the school district did the wrong thing in denying your child what you were asking for. And they'll actually issue what's called a findings letter, and they'll set out what the facts are. And, sometimes you don't win, but if you do win, it will set out for the school district and get an agreement to get your child what they need. We know already that there have been 3,200 complaints that were summarily dismissed from the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. We're not sure. At one point, we're not sure the base, they do more than disability. Of course, they do race and they do gender and other, bases under other laws as well, like Title IX, for instance. And so we're not really sure what that means, but I think it's just common sense that if you have a 50% reduction in the people who are handling complaints, that is going to elongate the amount of time it takes to receive and process a complaint. And so I'm assuming that is going to happen. You may also see, further reductions in the Department of Education. I think that it's been made very clear that one of the goals of the current administration is just sort of the elimination of the Department of Education. This is just, I think, the first of many steps. And so, it really remains to be seen. And so one of the things I'm encouraging people to do is just hold fast. There's a lot of things we don't know. There are a lot of court challenges going on to a lot of these things, including the staff reductions. So when you hear things like the Supreme Court said the administration can go ahead with the firings, that's not exactly true. What the Supreme Court is saying is they're lifting the injunction against doing it. That doesn't mean they've made a finding that determinations were rightful or lawful. And so I think it gets, I don't want to get too in the weeds or inside legal baseball on this, but I would say just remain calm. I don't think schools themselves are anxious to get embroiled, and start taking rights away from students and getting embroiled in private lawsuits, which are also an option. And the other thing, though, that I am telling people is, you want to start looking at your state laws. There are some laws like in California that really mirror Section 504 and IDEA. And the ADA is always out there to provide protection and hasn't really been a part of this reduction so far of the federal government. So
yeah, thank you for that. And that was actually something I was going to chime in on as well, is that we are fortunate in Michigan to have those laws that also mirror the federal laws. And so when we hear this news, like you said, there's a lot to take in. There's a lot that's uncertain still, but I am grateful to say here in Michigan, we do have those similar processes. And in fact, last year in our back to school conference, we had a really, really wonderful session with someone who talked about how to file a complaint when you need to do that at the state level. So that resource is available as well. So we're all watching, and there are some other pathways, and I'm grateful for that too. So thank you so much, Allison. We may be able to talk a little bit more about some of these pieces, but I'd also like to invite Kalia Fleming, who's going to now talk to us about the Epilepsy and Seizure Safe Classrooms work. The Seizure Safe Classrooms program is really exciting in what it provides for students in their classrooms. So I'm just wondering, Kalia, if you can tell us about the development of the Seizure Safe Classroom program and why was it created? What motivated this?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. And Allison, you made some phenomenal points, which is going to make my talking points a lot easier because I can leverage some of what you said before. But in general, so the Seizure Safe Classrooms program sits under the Seizure Safe Schools legislation. I'll talk a little bit about that. But the program in itself is really developed and designed to equip K through 12 students with knowledge and skills related to epilepsy, seizure awareness, and seizure first aid, right? So the tools and resources we have under the Seizure Safe Classrooms program was created to help educators and students recognize seizures, different types of seizures, increase epilepsy awareness, how to properly provide seizure first aid, and educational tools and resources that they can keep going back to and leveraging to increase their awareness. As I mentioned earlier, this kind of sits under the Seizure Safe Schools legislation, which the Epilepsy Foundation fully supported, wanting to get that passed in all states. The legislation itself includes 5 key core components, if you will. It includes training school personnel to recognize seizures and provide first aid. So it's not just student education and awareness, it's also educators and school personnel. Ensuring that the seizure action plan is a part of the student's file in school settings, administering prescribed FDA-approved medications like Allison mentioned before, and educating students about epilepsy, which is what the seizure safe classrooms component, that was really my lane in getting that K through 12 content and curriculum situated and developed. So that's the student education piece. And then last but not least, implementing a Good Samaritan clause. So those are the components of the Seizure Safe Schools legislation, and the Seizure Safe Classroom program is really geared towards making sure students have tools, resources they need to increase their awareness of epilepsy and seizure first aid.
Absolutely excellent.
I do want to say here, we tend to say K through 12 classroom settings. The content and curriculum for Seizure Safe Classrooms is not just geared toward classroom settings. I know that can be a little misleading with the title. Anywhere that there are youth gathered after school programs, community groups and organizations, this content is well suited to be utilized there as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And just to let folks here who may be watching know, we have introduced this legislation, or we have our bill sponsor who has introduced this legislation in Michigan. So it's the Seizure Safe Schools Act, and we're hoping that this passes this year, which does have all of those components that you mentioned. And we know that seizures can happen in the classroom, on the playground, on the bus. We really want educators and all school personnel, whatever role they may have, to be educated on how to best respond. And what I love in this Seizure Safe Classrooms program is that students also get to learn this, which is wonderful for students with epilepsy, but also their peers. And we realize they will carry that knowledge well beyond their young years. So can you tell us some of the goals and some of the key focus areas of the program?
Absolutely. So the program's primary goals, as I mentioned, are to educate students about epilepsy. As was mentioned earlier, epilepsy looks different for different individuals. There are a lot of myths and stereotypes about what it is not. And so we really want to kind of clear up any misconceptions students may have, and school personnel as well. We want to teach students how to recognize different types of seizures. You'll notice as you go through the content and the curriculum, we do highlight, especially in the videos, different types of seizures so students can be aware. All of them, as you know, don't include or involve convulsions, for example. And so that was some of the myths and misconceptions we heard that we wanted to address. And then last but not least, obviously provide clear guidance to students on how to offer seizure first aid. If you're in a classroom setting, on the playground, on the basketball court, what do you do? How do you respond? When do you call for help? Do you put something in your friend's mouth or not? Do you keep their legs stationary or not? These are the types of things we address. And again, it really is focusing on equipping these students with the skills to, like I said, properly recognize seizures and what to do about them. We want to increase their confidence that they play a big role. The teacher, school health personnel, your coach can't be everywhere at once. So if you see something and you see a seizure happening, we want to make sure these students know exactly what to do.
That's just beautiful. And we've had stories about, students having seizures in the classroom, like, maybe the trained teacher was not there that day. There was a substitute teacher, and it was the students who knew what to do because they had been trained, and they said, hey, that seizure first aid poster is right there in the classroom. So that's great. And also I know for Seizure Safe Classrooms, there are different materials as a kind of based on age bracket. And can you tell us a little bit about the various components for different age groups and all of this?
Yeah, so we all love free 99, especially in this environment, okay? So this program is accessible for free. The toolkits that you just mentioned, Renee, are free for folks to access online. So we have 3 toolkits. You have K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. So elementary, middle, and high school age appropriate toolkits. These toolkits include short, interactive and engaging videos. There is not one video that's longer than 2 minutes. The videos include real life students who look like the students we're trying to reach. So that's a huge plus. Interactive lessons, so knowledge checks, worksheets that students can complete. And then for the high school component, we do have an on-demand online course that high school students can complete as well. Once they complete that, they also get a certificate of completion. The toolkits also include PowerPoints, handouts, stickers, posters that teachers, school health personnel, leaders, those who are working with students can use and leverage as well. The resources are designed to be both flexible and engaging. So let's say you have a teacher who says, hey, the PowerPoint works better for me because the videos are embedded in the PowerPoint versus having my students do worksheets. You might have an after school person who's like, hey, I need to leverage these worksheets because I need to make sure they know how to properly write out all the steps and the skills. So educators have the flexibility to kind of mix and match different components of the toolkits to help make sure students are learning and can properly list out the seizure first aid steps. It also provides, like I said, for the high school students, the on-demand course. I don't like to say it can be used in lieu of the high school PowerPoints or other resources because they complement each other well. But let's say you have 12th grader who couldn't stay for an after school program or was out of class that day. They can go online themselves, access the on-demand course, which really covers the same points that are in the PowerPoint. We've also heard that some of the upper class teachers or educators prefer the on-demand course to get through the day versus going through the PowerPoint. So you can use it either way. And again, once those students complete that on-demand course, the high school students, they do get a certificate of completion. And the on-demand course includes quizzes, activities, knowledge checks, and real life scenarios. We also have embedded some testimonials from students with epilepsy themselves in those videos as well.
Extraordinary. I'm just beaming as you talk about it because I know how important this is. And this program, of course, is designed to improve safety, no doubt, but also inclusion and understanding. And wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Allison hit the nail on the head in her remarks. So it's not just, parents and teachers. We want to make sure we get the point across that you don't want to exclude students or children with epilepsy. It's also their peers. Yeah. As children mature and navigate middle and high school, we all have heard horror stories of, what goes on in classroom and out of classroom settings. And so we really wanted to infuse a lot of reminders in the curriculum centered on empathy, centered on understanding, centered on dispelling a lot of the myths surrounding epilepsy and seizures, but also inclusion. We don't want students to be excluded from after school sports or field trips or other activities because they have epilepsy. Also in the content in the course, we have a lot of self-reflection questions that students can answer individually or in groups with how they themselves can be more empathetic to peers with epilepsy, or how they themselves can take it upon themselves to include their peers who may suffer from epilepsy and seizures versus ostracizing them out of fear or, just concern. We provide a lot of real life examples and tips on what students can do to make fellow students feel more welcome with epilepsy. So again, we really want to equip students with seizure first aid knowledge, as I mentioned. But again, the program also ensures that schools and youth programs, so again, this doesn't have to be in a stereotypical classroom setting, youth after school programs, Boys and Girls Club, that's fine, become more safer, more inclusive environments for those with epilepsy. And it really starts with understanding. Knowledge, yes, but actually understanding as well.
Yeah, and that understanding or that sense of connection really invites us into one another's stories, which, of course, makes us curious and more willing and open to learn that knowledge. And it's just beautiful work. Thank you. What are some of the future hopes for this program, and how can families and educators get involved or help bring it to their communities?
Yeah, so a few key focal areas for program expansion. Right now, we are in the throes of the Spanish adaptation of the program. So we want to make sure we reach diverse communities. And so we are working to get the program fully adapted into Spanish language for our Spanish language speaking populations. In addition to that, we're focusing also on more rural communities. So really doing targeted promotion and outreach to Arkansas, Florida, and Oklahoma, for example. We have partnerships we're building in those areas. But, it's important to say here that while a lot of things are centered on PowerPoints and videos, teachers, students, educators, youth group leaders can easily print out these resources, have it centered as more of a discussion versus leveraging technology and internet. We know that may not be a reliable resource for a lot of folks, particularly in rural communities and areas. And so we're trying to focus on that more as well through these partnerships. And we're trying to foster partnerships with different public health orgs and health organizations like SOFI chapters. And in Florida, for example, partnering with Epilepsy Foundation chapter affiliates like Florida Epilepsy Services to increase knowledge and awareness about the program. But also we're wanting to train these organizations through our implementation leaders arm of the program. So these are individuals who say, hey, I want to be an ambassador to train others on the program and to launch it in my school youth group or my school program. So we'll train them on how to properly utilize the toolkit, the resources in the toolkit. We give them discussion question prompts, all of that. We also recently, and I guess let me go back and kind of tell you where we stand to date so far. So as of a few days ago, we actually had about 375 individuals from various states have completed the toolkit access request form, meaning they are raising their hand to access the materials and leverage and use them in their communities and their school settings. We had for the high school on demand course over 100, I believe it's like 133 students, high school students who've completed the on-demand course on their own. And then we have about 28 Teen Speak Up ambassadors. So these are both Teen Speak Up participants and their parents or guardians who said, hey, we want to embed this in the Teen Speak Up Year of Service and utilize the toolkit and resources in my child's classroom, after school program with their peers. And so we're leveraging all of these partnerships, all of these ambassadors to promote and expand the program in different communities. Families and educators can certainly get involved. I believe Nicole is going to share in the YouTube show notes the link to the online learning portal where individuals can register for free to access the Seizure Safe Classrooms materials, as well as the toolkits. So once that is accessible to individuals, they can take it, utilize it, leverage it in their schools and their communities.
I love that. It's such a great vision too of empowerment of the community, also empowering itself and the people that they love and are desiring to best support. So I am blown away by this, and I think this is a good reminder for everyone watching that we have a wonderful structure of the Epilepsy Foundation in this country, so that you've got these affiliates and regions and chapters like the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. We are best equipped to serve Michigan. It's what we know. It's who is present with us, but we also have these great minds and people who are filled with passion at our national office who are resourcing us. So I just really want to thank you, Kalia Fleming and Allison Nickel, for bringing all your experience and wealth and passion into your wealth of passion into this work. So thank you for your time with us and for all that you do. It means the world. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd love to close in a very particular way. I'm wondering if each one of you could just share a little bit of encouragement for maybe anybody who's watching, if they're feeling overwhelmed, getting ready for the school year, or really just anything epilepsy related. What might you say to kind of give them a word of encouragement? I'm wondering, Kalia, if we can start with you.
Yeah, two quotes or reminders I've used in my work, working with various populations. The first is, bend but don't break. If you need to pause, if you need to take a break, parenting, adulting, life in this current climate, it is difficult. Then you add on the layer of caregiver or, managing epilepsy, right? Take care of yourself. Self-care is key. Bend, don't break. Where there's a will, there's a way. You can always find a way to circumvent and navigate to get the proper care and resources you need. Second thing I'll leave folks with is, an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So to your point, Renee, really leverage the Epilepsy Foundation, national resources, state chapter affiliates, support groups, what's worked for others, best practices, lessons learned. You are not alone. There are folks who've gone through your situation. So don't be afraid to speak up and speak out and seek support.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Allison, how about you?
Well, I don't think I should have to follow that eloquence, but I'll do my best. That seems unfair. That was beautiful. And thank you for all that you're doing for kids with epilepsy in schools. It's again a great force for good. I would say that, look, me and my friends have for 35 years been building a world for your kids so that it's not as hard as it was, so that they can get what they need. These systems are in place and have been in place for 35 years. This is not new to your school district, even if it is new to you. Being the parent, first of all, being a child with a disability and then being a parent of a child with disability, it can be a complicated and difficult path at times, and there's sort of no getting around that. But the legal structures are in place and have been in place for a long time. The vast majority of people don't have any problems with this. You'll get your 504 plan. School districts know how to comply with IDEA. They want to get their federal money. I mean, sometimes they're good guys, but also they want to get their federal money, and either works for me, frankly. And so I think I don't want to build up concern among people that is unnecessary. Now, I don't get those calls. Nobody calls me and says, wow, I had the greatest time getting my child what they need in school, right? So I only hear the bad stories, but there are millions of stories I don't hear where everything went very smoothly. And I just want to add one final thing, and that is, it's actually illegal for your child to be bullied. Your school has an obligation under the ADA to make sure that no child with a disability is harassed or bullied on the basis of that disability. So you don't have to rely on a school's goodwill. You actually have legal protection in that regard as well. And I just wanted to make that final point. But
Thank you for that.
And we're available if you ever need help, let us know.
That's amazing. And, I think everything you both just said is so filled with community, right? People who have fought for these rights, who enshrined them into law, people who care with all that empathy and want to see a better world for people with epilepsy and frankly, human beings. And we support that and celebrate that. So thank you for your time. And the last thing I'll say, our national office, and then of course, our whole network has begun to use language about making sure that no one faces epilepsy alone. And so if you, need to hear that one more time, that is something we want to leave with you in all of these resources, in all of these laws, and in our own relationships. Like, no one is facing this alone. So,
and no one has to face discrimination alone either.
100%. That's right. Ever. So thank you so much. And we'll move on to our last session of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, to wrap up our agenda today, I'm so grateful for our next speakers who are going to talk about an exciting project within the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and the Family Center Children's Special Health Care Services. And the project is called Michigan Youth with Epilepsy in Transition, otherwise known as MyYet. And to discuss this project with us, we have Michelle Berger, Bev Kreider, and Nicole Fitzpatrick. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. And as we get started, I thought it might be helpful for you to each introduce yourselves and describe your role in this project, MyYet, Michigan Youth with Epilepsy Transition, and maybe share a little bit about what's energizing you most. So Bev, I'm wondering if we can start with you, if you might introduce yourself a bit.
Sure. Thanks, Renee, and thanks for including us in your back to school project. We're happy to be able to talk about this work. I am Bev Kreider, and I have a consulting business, patient and family partnerships. I'm a consultant to this project. and my primary objective in that is to make sure that the voice of youth and their families are engaged with us as partners as we work to achieve the goals of the project moving forward. I get excited about a lot of things. I get excited about this work. I get excited about my grandkids. I get excited about music. There's lots of things.
Lots of things. That's so great. And Michelle, how about you?
Hi. Yes, I second what Bev had said. I am so appreciative to be here today, and for you inviting me. My name is Michelle Berger, and I am the transition specialist with the Children's Special Healthcare Services program, and I'm a co-lead on this project. I'm also the parent of 3 children with special healthcare needs, ranging in age from 13 to 31. And what energizes me the most about this project is probably the innovative work that we'll be doing by not just, kind of staying in our lane and focusing on healthcare transition, but working with others that have expertise in other areas of transition to collaborate, on resources and education, which we're going to talk about later in our session today.
That is great. Thank you so much. And Nicole, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Nicole Fitzpatrick, and I work with the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan as a community program specialist. In addition, I am also the mom of a young adult living with epilepsy. And so this work is really important to me, both as a parent and as a member of the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. And what energizes me the most is just the collaboration that's already happening as we begin and talking to agencies and what we're going to be able to bring forward for our community and the changes that we'll be able to see. It is really exciting. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Thanks to all 3 of you. And I also want to say, to Mayette, they are also our partner for the Back to School Conference. And so I thought this was a perfect time to introduce our community to this great work that's going on. And what do we mean when we talk about transition, and how do we make that better and smoother for all of our kids who are living with epilepsy? So Michelle, I wonder if we could start with you, and if you could tell us, what is this project, Michigan Youth with Epilepsy Transition Project? What is it about, and what might this mean for families and youth who are watching this today?
Yeah, of course. So this is a 5-year grant funded through HRSA to improve outcomes for youth with epilepsy who require supports and their families and caregivers as the youth transition from child to adult life. So, Michigan has a lot of great transition resources and services, but there is siloed transition work across the different systems, like between healthcare, education, employment, and independent living. Some youth and young adults and their families are not aware of the services that are available. And there's also a lack of transition processes within healthcare clinics. So those are going to be our 3 main areas for the grant. We will be partnering with agencies to bridge the gap between those systems and collaborate on gathering, developing, and sharing of resources. We're going to be partnering with 2 pediatric and 2 adult neurology practices to pilot the healthcare transition processes in their clinics, and also providing them with, the healthcare transition and the non-healthcare transition resources that they can use. And then also providing the transition education and resources for youth, young adults, and their families. So we're still in that planning phase, year 1, and collecting data to kind of dig deeper into where we are now with transition, as far as the strengths, the gaps, and the needs. And we're creating a transition advisory council to bring together youth and young adults, parents and caregivers, agencies, healthcare professionals, and state agencies to all assist with guiding the work of this project. So we'll have those 3 main focuses of the grant, but the specific details of those activities will be determined by the feedback that we receive. So we're excited to, bring all these individuals with varied experiences to the table, hear what they have to say, and then use that information to develop what we're calling a Michigan transition framework, that will help clinics agencies with that transition process and youth, young adults, and their families.
That is amazing. And, thank you for being one of the co-leads for this project. It's so important to see that all of this is connected and a smooth process, right? And increasing that knowledge is amazing. When most people think of transition out there, they might be thinking about transition to high school or from high school to post-secondary schools, or of course, maybe transition from pediatric care to adult care. What does transition mean when it comes to this project?
So, I always want to start with that basic definition for transition, and it's the period of time between childhood and adulthood. And it's important for teens to prepare and plan for what they want their adult life to be. Transitioning to an adult model of healthcare is one area of transition. There's also, like you mentioned, post-secondary education, which would be education after high school, like college, certificate programs, skilled trades, training programs. There's also employment and independent living. So our grant will have a focus on healthcare transition, moving from that pediatric model of care to an adult model of care, while also incorporating those other important areas and aspects of transition, and also addressing the varying levels of support that youth may need in those different areas.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Thank you. And I love that, it's kind of looking at the whole person and all the needs. So thank you for that. Bev, just a few questions for you as well. From your years of experience working with youth and family engagement, what are some of the things that they've shared about their hopes and fears during times of transition for their children? What's maybe some of the common things you hear?
Well, sure. From the family side, I think parents just really desperately want their children to live their best lives and to have kind of a smooth pathway. And as Michelle was pointing out, all the different aspects of life that they are able to, pick up, and they're past the baton, but there's several batons. There's the healthcare baton, there's the employment baton, there's the education baton, that they're going to be, healthy. They're going to take um, their health regimens seriously, because we've heard a lot of stories about kids who say, well, I think I feel okay, so I'm not going to take this med, and that doesn't usually work out very well. And so just that, a lot of the same fears that parents have for all children, like, did I do enough? Did I give them enough to be able to move forward with this? So it's why it's really important that transition discussions begin earlier, so you have a chance to sort of teach while they're learning, and know and have confidence that she knows she needs to take her meds, or he knows that this is okay and this is not okay. He knows who to contact when he goes away to, going away to college is a big thing. Like, oh, what if something happens? And I think, from the youth perspective, I'm especially excited about this emphasis on youth engagement in this project. They want to grow up and go do things and have as much independence as possible. So helping advance a system that gives youth those competencies is really important. Everybody feels a little more secure.
Thank you. And I loved, Michelle said this project is also being designed with the feedback and comments and all those hopes from families in the design of the project. So how can youth with epilepsy and their families be involved in shaping the project's design and direction? And why is that engagement so important for the project and also the youth and families themselves?
Sure. Well, first, but not most importantly, there's some federal requirements for youth and family engagement on this, which is wonderful. But it's important because, my daughter had epilepsy, and there were things that I knew about her, and things about how the system worked that the people who were delivering care didn't know. And so that input about, well, when you call this number, this is what happens, because the providers aren't calling those numbers, or this is what happens, or those kinds of things. The people who are closest to an issue are usually smartest about the issue. And so we want to just gather and capture as much of that wisdom and insight as we possibly can. So it does a couple of things. It gives us a direction, and it also gives us a quick and easy built-in evaluation, because especially the youth are usually not hesitant to say, that's not going to work. That's not, they tell us all the time, oh, that app is so yesterday, this is a thing that's the up and coming thing. So they've got their finger on the pulse of it. And, youth typically are pretty enthusiastic and pretty confident. And that's what we want in the design. So we've involved family and youth inputs in our development phase, in our implementation phases for sure. And then as we continue an ongoing evaluation moving forward, there are a lot of ways that youth and their family members can be engaged as partners with this project. We'll go into it a little bit more in a minute, but there's kind of no wrong door. And you, if somebody wants to be involved, A, will prepare you, B, will compensate you, and will make it as much or as little as you think works for you.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. I heard a nonprofit leader say recently, like those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And I thought that was wonderful. And then I'm also thinking, also in my mind, I'm hearing kind of the rallying cry of those who fought for disability rights, like nothing about us without us. And I love that this is happening this way. So thank you.
It just is not smart to do it any other way.
Right. You got to put your ear to the ground and hear where and how things are moving. Great. Nicole, you were involved also in a previous project in partnership with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and Children's Special Healthcare Services, and you were a parent advisor at that time on the Michigan Pediatric Epilepsy Project, also sometimes called MPEP. Can you share about that experience as a parent advisor? What was that like?
Yeah, thank you so much, Renee. So stepping into that project, well, first of all, being a parent with a child with chronic health, special needs, and specifically epilepsy in our family, there was a period of time where you're just in complete survival mode, trying to figure it all out, right? And then at a point in time when we got that kind of more stabilized, I'll say, she wasn't seizure free, but we were at least understanding of where we were and how to move forward. I started thinking about how could I make it better for people coming behind. Like, I knew there were gaps. I knew there were areas that we struggled. And I thought, in talking to other families, I heard similar stories. And I thought, so how can I help make this better? And in doing that research, found the project, applied to be a part of that project, and was the first time when I sat in a meeting not knowing really what I had to contribute, but they made it safe and they made me feel like, as a parent, my lived with experience had value. My voice in that moment, in that place, had value. And it was really the first time that I felt empowered as a parent. And so growing through that experience also led me to other opportunities and to make career changes, and then ultimately led me to my work here at the foundation. So I was able to see the changes. I was able to see the changes that were being made for my daughter and for the future for her. I was able to actually put into place changes for her that I was aware of and things that we were working on within that project. So yeah, it was a phenomenal experience. And now when I see those things in place in clinics, and I go places and I see a poster that I know had impact, or we had an impact in having that be made, that's a really good feeling. And I think about all the people that's helping. That's phenomenal. So when this project came along, and now is my work with the foundation, I'm excited to be part of the team that's working with the youth and the families to engage in this project and to help them have a similar experience.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And based on all that experience and your role with this project, what are some of your hopes for parent and youth advisors as
Yes,
they might engage my yet?
absolutely. So I think, many families, specifically focusing on transition, many families, as you're aging with your child and going through that, you're so focused on that health aspect, and things can creep up quickly. And you get to the point where you start thinking, okay, what's next? And there are services out there, there are agencies out there to help along that process. And I didn't find them until after. And I think again about what the benefit could be for those people. So I'm super excited to be able to bring that information forward and help people prepare sooner. I mean, there's baby steps you can take along the way. And I do think even thinking about transition as a whole, because my daughter with epilepsy is the youngest of five, any of transition topics can help anyone, I think, and benefit along the way. So the opportunity for them to have, consider these things earlier, have a voice in those tools in their creation, and then, yeah, I think just creating that overall general awareness, I think is going to be very exciting.
It is exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Michelle, as this project is beginning, as you mentioned, this is year one. What are some of the major outcomes you're working toward in this first year?
Sure. So, yeah, so that first year of the grant is a planning phase, which we are so thankful for. We are finalizing what's called a landscape analysis, which is looking at the transition services and supports in Michigan. And that includes interviews with agencies to learn more about the services that they offer, strengths and barriers that they experience, and recommendations for improving that transition process and collaboration. We are collecting baseline data and feedback from youth, young adults, parents, and caregivers regarding their experience with transition, with the transition services and those supports and resources, and what is needed to help the youth with a successful transition to adult life. One thing I don't think I had talked about earlier was feedback from neurology clinic staff also. We're going to look at that. So we know like the strengths and barriers for them in implementing transition processes in their clinics and recommendations for how to improve that. So kind of getting back to your question, the outcome for year one is to form a transition advisory council, use the information that we collected to identify those transition barriers and some opportunities, develop those partnerships and collaborations that's going to help us develop what we're going to call like a Michigan transition framework and move this work forward.
Extraordinary. And as you're beginning to hold discussions with these agencies that are working with youth and transition, have you learned anything new or anything that really surprised you?
Yeah, so most agencies have mentioned the siloed work across the systems, kind of everybody staying in their own lane, which was not surprising. But what has surprised me is, the amount of outreach that's done for some of these agencies and the community not still being aware of those services. As a transition specialist, I knew of these agencies and resources, but after meeting with them, I had to take away from every meeting. I learned something new from them. So I'm just excited to share that information.
That's great. And Bev and Nicole, anything that surprised you so far?
I wouldn't say that there are surprises. I think what we've heard, there's some common refrains, but people are doing exciting project in small little pockets. And so I wasn't surprised, but wasn't aware of some of those things previously, but it really creates greater opportunities for us to really infuse this project with youth and family partnership. Because those are, it cuts our recruitment burden down because there's people who are already out there doing the work who are committed and caring to it. And we're just really excited about that.
Good. Nicole, anything from you?
Yeah, there were actually, for me, I think being newer in this space, I know Michelle and Bev both have years ahead of me in experience of working in this space, and this is a newer um, career path than just awareness for me. But as a parent, there have already been a number of agencies and programs that we have spoken with that I knew nothing about, and so that is enlightening and also encouraging for the work we're going to do. So I'm so excited to think about what this is going to look like, what this has the potential to look like as the project proceeds of awareness at an earlier phase. Like intervention earlier is always preferred, right? At any point in time. So yeah, definitely some surprises for me. And yeah, I know where we're headed and I'm super excited about that.
It's so valuable that MyYet can be a hub for all of these pieces. And I would assume some agencies will over time begin to learn about other agencies as well. And more partnerships come from that, which is really exciting. Um, for Michelle and Bev, how do you anticipate, speaking of agencies, that youth and families might become engaged in this project? How might all those parties, be a part of this work?
Sure. So I'll kind of speak to the agency piece. So during our interviews with agencies, we're also including, just talking about ways that they can be engaged beyond that interview process. There's opportunities to sit on the Transition Advisory Council that we talked about, providing educational webinars on their areas of expertise, participating in creating transition resources, so there'll be a lot of different areas that they will be able to participate. And all of them that we've met with so far have all been excited and been very interested in further collaboration. So we're, so that's been very exciting to see as well.
Love that. Bev, what would you say?
Well, I would kind of mirror what Michelle said, because all of those places that are agencies are going to be involved, we're going to involve families as well. So we're putting together the Technical Advisory Council. We definitely want youth and families represented there. And that's kind of a higher touch opportunity, but there's other softer touch, that don't require as much commitment of time or energy. Nicole referenced being in a clinic and seeing a poster that was developed by our previous project. So I'm sure we're going to have a fair amount of materials development. We want youth and families to tell us, what are the key points that we need to cover here, and then put it together and send it back out and say, does this make sense? Is this what you wanted to know? So some materials review. So it can be from a variety of different ways. And I think that I had this image of a tapestry, and we've discovered all these beautiful threads in all these different agencies. So, we talked with a group yesterday that they've got a youth advisory committee. And so if we tap into one or two representatives from that committee, then we have outreach to many, many more. I'm sure that we will be I know for sure we're going to be developing training, some leadership training for youth and family members about being engaged and how to make the most out of your experience and bring that forward for systems change. Most people are excited about taking their experience and weaving it into something that, serves the greater good. And we have many, and it might be one time, but that one time is still going to be really important to us.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. And Michelle, at this early stage of the project, do you have any specific outcomes you'd like to see for the project?
Oh, I have so many. I'll just share a few though. So, we know that there are gaps when it comes to transition, and we don't know all the gaps at this point until we kind of gather more information. But like I mentioned, we do know that collaboration across systems and agencies is going to be important. And so we're going to be developing a plan for continued collaboration. So it doesn't end when this grant ends. We want to make sure that continues. We also know that, some youth, young adults, and families are not aware of the services and the resources available. So we want to develop a variety of resources, including a Michigan transition roadmap, which we're excited for. And lastly, we want healthcare providers to incorporate, transition into their processes. So those are the main things. But, as I mentioned, we're going to be piloting those processes with 2 adult and 2 pediatric neurology clinics initially. But then, as the years of the grant move forward, we want to replicate those effective processes with additional clinics across the state. So I know we were kind of talking, probably smaller scale, but excited that, once that's the ultimate outcome is that, we'll find really great processes and collaboration and kind of move that across the state.
That will be so valuable. Thank you. Nicole, just thinking about this being a 5-year project, and for some people watching today, they may need information now. Are there some resources that already exist today that can help people in transition planning?
Yeah, so it's been very interesting, again, just doing research through the project and looking for some of those resources. We have been able to find there are a number of different, like Michelle was mentioning, some of those siloed effects, that there are groups, and there's actually some groups that have worked together in collaboration. And MIT, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Michelle, but there's an agencies that came together and created a transition tool that we will make available in our notes section from this, that anything that exists today, we want to make sure people have access to today as we work through, so they'll be able to continue supporting and explore that information.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bev, I'm sure this is a question people are asking. How can people get involved? Youth, parents, educators, service providers, how can they get involved with this project?
Absolutely. Well, so for youth and families, we're asking them to contact, and we have some recruitment materials that Nicole, I'm sure, can post with the foundation and get that information, make it available to people. We're kind of some wide open gate, and then our youth and family engagement team will talk to folks to find out, how involved do you want to be? What's your experience previous to this? How much time do you have? And share with them all the supports. We have a number of important supports available to support that involvement in the project. And we'll explain all of that and, plug people in where it makes the most sense.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And I want to thank all of you, and of course the whole leadership team and agencies and youth and families that are already involved, because I think a lot of wonderful things will come out of this, and how wonderful to have navigators that are laying the groundwork and charting out that landscape. And once we do that, we know how to improve things, and we certainly know how to make it more connectional. So thank you for your time and for sharing about this project. We are excited to see this all come into being, and we will put some links in our description for this YouTube video. And of course, if you have questions about MyYet, or really anything that has been a part of our Back to School conference today, you can absolutely reach out to the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. We'll be glad to help you with that. And of course, thank you so much for watching our conference on demand, and know that your voice and who you are in this world matters a great deal to us, and we learn from you in the same ways that you learn from us. Thank you for giving us this time, and we hope you have a wonderful school year, and just know we are here for you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renee.